When you leave this life and before you enter the next life, there is a place called an intermediary realm. You stay there for 7 days. You should resolve to keep chanting the names of the 3 treasures without ceasing while you are there. The 3 treasures are Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. After 7 days, you die into another intermediary realm and remain there for no more than 7 days. At this time, you can see and hear without hindrance, like someone with a celestial eye. Resolve to encourage yourself to keep chanting the names of the 3 treasures without ceasing. I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dharma, I take refuge in the Sangha.
There is a secret hidden within the Tibetan Book of the Dead, one that changes everything we think we know about existence. It tells us that death is not a single moment, it is a journey, a passage through different states of being known as bardos. But what are bardos and how are they actively affecting our daily lives, even without us knowing? Today, we'll find out the truth to all of these questions, and some harsh truths about death that the elites of the world don't want you to know. The bridge between worlds. First things first, a bardo is a space between worlds, a bridge between what was and what will be. It is a state where time no longer moves as we know it, where the veil between life and death is thin, and where the mind creates realities that feel just as vivid, just as real as the life we have left behind. But here's the part no one tells you. We are not just in the bardos after death, we are in them now. Life itself is a bardo, a dreamlike state between the infinite past and the unknown future. Every moment of transformation, every time we shed an old identity, leave behind a version of ourselves, or step into something new, we enter a bardo. The problem is that most of us don't realize it. We move through life blindly, reacting, clinging, resisting. We fear change because we don't understand that change is the very nature of reality itself. The concept of death as a transition, rather than an end, is not unique to the bardo thodol. In Eastern traditions, particularly in Hinduism and Taoism, death is often described as a doorway, a passage between states of existence rather than a final, absolute stop. One of the most striking parallels can be found in the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna speaks of the soul as something eternal, changing bodies as one would change garments. This idea echoes the lessons of the bardo thodol, where the soul moves through different states, shaped by its past choices, fears, and attachments. In Taoist thought, there is a belief in the flow of existence, an eternal cycle where life and death are merely transformations within the Great Tao. The Tao Te Ching speaks of returning to the source, much like the bardo thodol describes the possibility of recognizing the true nature of consciousness at the moment of death. If one surrenders, if one lets go of attachments and fear, liberation is possible. But if fear takes over, if the ego resists dissolution, the journey continues, shaped by karma and unresolved lessons. Both of these traditions, like the bardo thodol, emphasize that death is not something to be feared, but something to be understood. Fear is what binds the soul to illusion, what keeps it caught in the cycle. This aligns with the Buddhist teaching that clinging, whether to life, identity, or beliefs, leads to suffering. Liberation comes from seeing through the illusion, from realizing that what we think of as self is nothing more than a collection of thoughts, memories, and attachments. But how does one prepare for such a moment? In both Buddhist and Hindu practices, meditation serves as a rehearsal for death. The stillness, the detachment, the ability to watch thoughts without becoming trapped by them. These are all skills needed in the afterlife journey. In Tibetan Buddhism, practitioners engage in phowa, a practice designed to train the mind to release attachment at the moment of death, directing consciousness toward enlightenment rather than rebirth. Similarly, in Hinduism, chanting the name of a deity or focusing on divine presence at the time of death is believed to guide the soul toward liberation. The Bardo Thodol is not just a book about what happens after death, it is a guide on how to live. If one can detach from illusions in life, if one can see through the shifting nature of reality, then one can navigate the afterlife without fear. And this idea is not exclusive to Buddhism, it is woven into the very fabric of many Eastern traditions. The journey of the soul after death has captivated human imagination for millennia. In ancient Egypt and Tibet, two distinct yet deeply philosophical cultures explored this mysterious journey in profound ways. While separated by vast oceans and centuries, the Egyptian Book of the Dead and the Tibetan Book of the Dead share startling similarities. These texts are not simply ancient religious manuscripts, they are roadmaps for navigating the perilous realms of the afterlife, offering wisdom not just for those who have passed, but for those who are still living. The first thing that comes to mind when looking at these two sacred texts is their shared focus on transition. The Egyptian Book of the Dead, often thought of as a guide to the afterlife, details a complex process where the soul undergoes trials, purification, and ultimate judgment. In a similar vein, the Tibetan Book of the Dead provides a roadmap for navigating the bardo, the space between death and rebirth. While the Egyptians spoke of the judgment of the soul by Osiris, the Tibetans spoke of the soul's journey through the intermediate states, or bardos, guided by the wisdom of spiritual teachings. This shared focus on judgment and the soul's transformation is profound. In both texts, the soul is not passive, but an active participant in its journey. In the Egyptian tradition, the deceased was expected to declare their heart's purity before the gods. The Tibetan Book of the Dead offers a similar exercise, urging the individual to face their past, confront attachment, and dissolve illusions. Both texts tell us that the soul must undergo self-reflection and deep purification before it can move forward. However, these two texts are also deeply shaped by the unique spiritual landscapes from which they originated. The Egyptians, deeply embedded in the idea of cosmic balance, believed that the soul's journey could only succeed with the help of divine entities, offering a sense of divine protection. The Tibetan Book of the Dead, on the other hand, encourages a more solitary journey, with the soul relying on its own inner wisdom and awareness to navigate the afterlife. This difference may seem stark, but the goal remains the same: guidance toward enlightenment or rebirth, liberation from the cycle of suffering. One striking similarity between the two books lies in their shared emphasis on the transformative power of knowledge. In Egypt, the deceased was equipped with powerful spells, often written on papyrus scrolls and placed in their tombs, to ensure safe passage through the afterlife. These spells were intended to ward off malevolent forces and facilitate ascension. Similarly, in Tibetan Buddhism, the Book of the Dead contains specific instructions for meditation, mantras and teachings that offer protection and insight for the deceased during the bardo. Both traditions highlight the importance of spiritual tools and wisdom to guide the soul through its transition. The teachings of both texts are not confined to the afterlife. They contain vital life lessons for those still walking the earth. Just as the Egyptians believed that the heart must be weighed for its purity, the Tibetans stressed that life must be lived with mindfulness, detachment, and a deeper understanding of impermanence. In both cases, the key to successfully navigating life and death lies in the cultivation of wisdom. This wisdom, whether drawn from the Egyptian gods or the Tibetan lamas, points toward the same truth: that attachment, ego, and ignorance are the primary obstacles in the journey toward freedom. Perhaps the most powerful lesson we can learn from these ancient texts is the idea that death is not an end, but a continuation. Whether through the Egyptian judgment process or the Tibetan bardo, death is portrayed not as a finality but as a passage, an invitation to transcend the material world and enter a realm of transformation. Both the Egyptian and Tibetan traditions urge us to view life and death as interconnected, as two sides of the same coin. Life is but a preparation for death, and death is the next step in a much larger journey. As we delve deeper into the teachings of both traditions, we begin to see that they offer us more than just descriptions of the afterlife. They provide us with a map for living consciously. The Egyptian Book of the Dead teaches us to live with integrity, to prepare for the judgment of the heart, and to seek alignment with cosmic order. The Tibetan Book of the Dead offers us practices to bring awareness to the present moment, dissolve attachment to the material, and prepare for the inevitable moment of passing. Both texts remind us of the fragility of life and the importance of embracing death, not as a fearsome unknown, but as a natural process, a return to the divine. Whether we walk the paths of ancient Egypt or the Tibetan mountains, the message remains the same. The key to transcending suffering lies not in avoiding death, but in understanding it. And in understanding it, we find the key to living a life of purpose, mindfulness, and spiritual freedom. The bardo within life. There is also an obscure belief found in the Bon tradition, the ancient spiritual system of Tibet that predates Buddhism. The Bonpo teachings describe a different kind of bardo, one that exists within life itself. Known as the Treko Bardo, this state is said to be an opportunity for spontaneous realization. It suggests that enlightenment can happen at any moment, even before death, if one is able to cut through illusions with sudden clarity. This teaching offers a radical perspective, that death is not the only gateway to liberation, and that waiting until the afterlife to seek understanding is a mistake. If one can recognize the true nature of reality in the present, then the cycle of birth and death is already transcended. This obscure teaching aligns with the idea that every moment is a rehearsal for death. The dissolution of the ego, the surrender of attachment, and the ability to see through the veils of perception are not just for the dying, they are for the living as well. If we can walk through life with awareness, if we can meet each moment as if it were a bardo, then death itself loses its power to frighten us. So, back to the original idea, according to the teachings of the Bardo Thodol, there are three main bardos after death. The moment of death is not silent, it is not empty, it is not darkness. The moment of death. This is the Chikai Bardo, the moment of death itself. This is a moment unlike anything we have ever experienced, yet it is the most familiar thing of all. It is said that in this instant, everything we thought we were, our name, our body, our memories, falls away. What remains is something vast, something beyond thought, something that has always been there but was hidden beneath the noise of living. Imagine standing in front of a great mirror, but instead of reflecting your face, it shows you the truth of what you are. Not your history, not your personality, not your mistakes or triumphs, just pure, infinite existence. This is the light of the Chikai Bardo, the blinding radiance that is said to appear the moment the body takes its last breath. It is not a physical light, though many who have had near-death experiences describe something like it. It is the raw, undiluted presence of reality itself, beyond form, beyond limits. For those who can recognize this light as their own true nature, liberation happens instantly. There is no struggle, no hesitation. It is like waking up from a long dream and realizing you were never really lost, never truly separate, never anything but this vast awareness. Some teachings compare this moment to a drop of water returning to the ocean, effortless, natural, complete. But for most, this is not what happens. The light is too intense, it is too overwhelming. The mind, shaped by years of conditioning, is afraid. It clings to what it knows, thoughts, emotions, the idea of self. It looks for something familiar, something solid, something to hold on to. But in the Chikai Bardo, there is nothing to hold on to. The ego, which spent a lifetime building its identity, suddenly finds itself face to face with the truth that it was never real to begin with. Imagine being in a dark room your whole life and suddenly stepping into the noonday sun. The brightness is blinding. Your first instinct is to turn away, to shield your eyes, to retreat back into the darkness. This is what happens to most souls in the Chikai Bardo. Instead of embracing the light, they recoil. Instead of recognizing it as home, they fear it as something foreign. This moment is critical. It is said that if a soul can remain still, if it can let go of fear, if it can surrender to the light, it will be free. But the mind is restless. It starts searching, grasping, and pulling back towards something it can understand. And the moment that happens, the light fades. It does not disappear entirely, but it softens, splits, and fragments into something lesser. The soul drifts, drawn towards something familiar, something safer. Those who recognize this light as their own true nature are liberated instantly, freed from the cycle of rebirth. But for most, fear takes over. The mind, conditioned by a lifetime of attachments and illusions, turns away. It is said that in this instant, we are shown the pure, blinding light of truth, something so powerful that most souls cannot face it. The journey through the Chikai Bardo is not just an experience of the afterlife, it is a reflection of how we live. The way we react to the blinding truth at the moment of death mirrors the way we react to the truths in life. We often turn away from what is uncomfortable, clinging to what feels safe, even if it is an illusion. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus understood this deeply. He taught us that most suffering comes from our attachment to things beyond our control. Life, he said, is not meant to be grasped too tightly. It moves, shifts, changes, and if we resist, we suffer. But if we learn to surrender, to accept reality as it is, we find freedom. This idea is strikingly similar to what happens in the Chikai Bardo. Those who can surrender to the light are free. Those who resist are drawn back into illusion. Epictetus often compared life to a play. Imagine you are an actor on stage. You have a role to play, lines to speak, and actions to perform, but you do not control the script. The playwright has already written it. Your job is not to fight against the story, but to act your part with grace. If you try to control the whole play and demand that the script be rewritten to your liking, you will only create frustration for yourself. But if you accept your role, if you trust the story unfolding, you move with ease. This is the same lesson that Chikai Bardo offers. When the soul meets the radiant light of truth, it has two choices: resist or surrender. Those who resist are trapped by their own fear, like an actor refusing to leave the stage when the play is over. They cling to their old self, their old identity, and in doing so, they remain bound to the cycle of illusion. But those who surrender, those who recognize the light as their true nature, step off the stage and into something far greater. There is a story told in Stoic philosophy about a dog tied to a moving cart. The cart moves forward whether the dog likes it or not. The dog has two choices. It can resist, pulling against the rope, fighting every step, exhausting itself in a battle it cannot win, or it can run alongside the cart, moving with it, accepting the direction it is being taken. In both cases, the dog ends up in the same place, but one path is filled with struggle and the other with peace. The moment of death is the same. The light appears, the truth is revealed, and the soul can either resist or surrender. Epictetus would say that freedom is not found in controlling what happens, but in controlling how we respond. Those who trust the light, who let go of their attachments, who stop pulling against the cart, will find that the path to liberation has been open all along. The place of visions. This leads to the Chonyid Bardo, a place of visions. Here we are confronted with radiant beings, peaceful deities, and terrifying figures. Some appear as guides, others as demons, but what many fail to understand is that these beings are not external forces. They are mirrors of the self, reflections of the mind's deepest truths. The ones who recognize this, who remain calm and see through the illusion, can transcend. But those who react with fear, clinging to old beliefs, are pulled deeper into confusion. The Chonyid Bardo is not a place in the way we think of places. It is a state of being, a realm woven from the fabric of the mind itself. Here the soul is no longer bound by the physical body, yet it still carries the weight of its thoughts, emotions, and attachments. The radiant beings that appear are not strangers, nor are the terrifying figures that follow. They are us, our fears, our hopes, our forgotten memories, our hidden truths. This is where many become lost. They see the luminous deities and believe they are external saviors. They see the wrathful demons and believe they are being punished. But what if neither is true? What if everything in the Chonyid Bardo is a reflection of the self? Imagine standing in front of a mirror, but instead of your body, the mirror reveals everything inside you. Every thought you've ever had, every fear you've tried to bury, every moment of kindness, every moment of anger, it all appears before you, given shape and form. If you've spent your life cultivating wisdom, love and awareness, the figures before you will be bright and comforting, guiding you toward the light. But if you've lived in fear, in selfishness, in ignorance, the mirror will reflect that back as well, in the form of dark and terrifying shapes. The great Tibetan masters have said that the beings of the Chonyid Bardo have no independent existence. They are projections of the mind, formed by the energy of our own consciousness. This idea is not so different from what Carl Jung described in his study of the shadow self, the hidden parts of our psyche that influence us without our awareness. Jung believed that if we do not face our shadow while we are alive, it will rule over us in ways we do not understand. The Chonyid Bardo takes this one step further. It forces us to face everything we ignored in life all at once. This is why the instructions of the Bardo Thodol urge the soul to remain calm. If you recognize the visions as your own projections, they lose their power over you. The demons cannot harm you because they are you. The deities cannot save you because they are you. The moment this realization takes hold, the illusions dissolve and the soul moves closer to liberation. But if fear wins, if the mind clings to what it thinks is real, the journey becomes more difficult. The peaceful beings fade and the terrifying figures grow stronger. The deeper the fear, the more solid the illusions become. It is like falling into a nightmare, one where everything feels real because the mind believes in it completely. Yet even in the darkest depths of the Chonyid Bardo, there is still a way out. The key is not to fight, not to run, but to recognize, to see through the illusion, to understand that none of this is separate from the self. When this truth is realized, even the most terrifying visions lose their grip, and the soul moves forward toward the light that has been waiting all along. The realm of rebirth. Then comes the Sidpa Bardo, the realm of rebirth. Here the soul is drawn back into the world, pulled by past desires, emotions and attachments. It is said that at this stage one sees potential parents drawn toward the life that matches their unresolved karma. Without awareness, the cycle repeats. Life begins again, with no memory of what came before. Imagine waking up in a room you've never seen before, but everything in it feels strangely familiar. The colors, the scent in the air, the way the light comes through the window, it all feels like a dream you once had but can't quite remember. This is the Sidpa Bardo, the realm of rebirth, where the soul is drawn back into a new life, guided by invisible forces it doesn't fully understand. Think of it like a river that always flows back to the same valley. No matter how far the water travels, it is pulled by the shape of the land, by the grooves and pathways carved by time. In the same way, our soul is drawn toward the life that matches the patterns we've created through past actions, desires and emotions. If we lived in fear, we may return to a life where fear surrounds us. If we lived with anger, we may be pulled into a world where anger finds us at every turn. The Sidpa Bardo is not random. It is shaped by everything we have carried with us. Now imagine a moth drawn to a flame. It doesn't question why it moves toward the light. It just feels the pull. This is how the soul moves through the Sidpa Bardo. It is said that at this stage one sees potential parents not as conscious beings, but as a kind of magnetic force. The soul is instinctively drawn toward the life that aligns with its unresolved karma. If we left things undone, if we clung to certain desires, if we held on to deep regrets, those things act like a signal, calling us back to a world where we must face them again. It's like walking into a bookstore and being drawn to a book without knowing why. You pick it up, start reading, and suddenly realize it's exactly what you need. Life does the same thing with us. The Sidpa Bardo pulls us toward the story that matches what we need to resolve. Some people are drawn to lives of comfort, some to struggle, and some to situations that will force them to grow. It's not punishment, it's a mirror. The life we enter is a reflection of what we have yet to understand. Think about a child playing a video game. If they fail a level, they have to restart, trying again until they get it right. The Sidpa Bardo works in a similar way. Without awareness, the cycle repeats. We return to the same lessons, the same emotions, and the same challenges over and over until we finally wake up and break free. But here's the real question. What happens if you become aware of this while you're still alive? What if you recognize the patterns now and change them before the cycle begins again? Would the river still flow the same way? Would the moth still chase the flame? Or would you choose a different path entirely? This cycle has been turning for lifetimes. Over and over, souls pass through these bardos, unaware that they hold the key to their own liberation. But what if the secret to escaping this cycle is not just in understanding death, but in understanding life? Buddhist teachings tell us that the way we live now determines how we move through the bardos. If we spend our lives in fear, in attachment, in denial of change, then we will carry that same energy into death. But if we learn to see through illusion now, if we train our minds to recognize the shifting nature of reality, then when the moment comes, we will not run. We will see clearly, we will remember. This is why monks meditate on death every day, not as a morbid obsession, but as a way to wake up. They practice dying before they die so that when the time comes, they will not be lost. They understand that the bardos are not something to fear, but something to master. But what about those who are not monks? What about the rest of us, moving through the chaos of everyday life? Can we prepare, even as we work, love, struggle, and dream? A guide on how to live. At the end of the day, the Bardo Thodol is not just a guide for navigating the afterlife. It is equally a manual for how to live. Beneath its descriptions of luminous visions, terrifying illusions, and the process of rebirth lies a profound teaching that the way we respond to death mirrors the way we have lived. The choices we make in life, the attachments we form, and the fears we carry all shape our experience in the bardos. But if the bardos are states of transition, then life itself is a bardo, a constant movement between moments, choices, and transformations. One of the most important lessons from the Bardo Thodol is the recognition of impermanence. In the moment of death, the self we once clung to dissolves, and we are confronted with a vast, open reality. But what if we understood that this dissolution is happening every moment? Our thoughts arise and pass away, our emotions shift like clouds in the sky, and the people and circumstances around us are in a constant state of change. To live with the awareness of impermanence means to release the illusion of control and embrace the present moment fully. It means understanding that nothing truly belongs to us, not our possessions, not our identities, not even our own bodies. The more we accept this, the less suffering we create for ourselves and others. The teachings of the Bardos also emphasize the power of the mind. In the Chonyid Bardo, souls encounter peaceful and wrathful deities that are, in reality, projections of their own consciousness. These beings reflect the mind's fears, desires, and unresolved struggles. The same principle applies to life. Every experience, whether joyful or painful, is shaped by our perception. A difficult situation can be seen as a curse or as an opportunity for growth. A person who challenges us can be viewed as an enemy or as a teacher. The Bardo Thodol reminds us that our reactions determine our reality. By training the mind in awareness and equanimity, we can learn to face both life and death with clarity instead of fear. Another key lesson is the importance of cultivating compassion and detachment. In the Sidpa Bardo, the realm of rebirth, the soul is drawn toward a new life based on its attachments and unresolved karma. This cycle repeats endlessly until one attains liberation. The same cycle plays out in life. We become entangled in patterns of suffering because we cling to desires, grudges, and expectations. To break free, we must practice letting go, not with indifference but with wisdom. Loving without attachment, giving without expecting, and acting without grasping for a specific outcome allows us to move through life with greater ease. The more we loosen our grip on the things we believe define us, the more we discover the boundless nature of who we truly are. The Bardo Thodol teaches that death is not an end, but a continuation, and the same applies to every moment we live. We are constantly dying in the past and being reborn into the present. The question is not whether we will face transition, but how we will meet it. Will we resist, clinging to what is familiar, or will we surrender to the flow of change? To live with the wisdom of the bardos is to embrace each moment as an opportunity for awakening. It is to die before we die, to let go of false identities, fears, and attachments, so that when the final moment arrives, we greet it not with fear, but with recognition, and in that recognition, we find true freedom. Throughout history, mystics have understood this truth and sought to embody it in their lives. One such figure is Ramana Maharshi, the Indian sage whose teachings closely align with the wisdom of the bardos. When he was just 16, he had a profound experience of death, not a physical death, but an inner dissolution of the self. Overcome by an intense fear of dying, he lay down and surrendered completely, observing the process as if he were already dead. Yet, instead of fading into nothingness, he discovered something extraordinary. A vast, unshaken awareness beyond the mind and body. This realization changed his life. He left his home, retreated to the sacred mountain of Arunachala, and spent years in deep meditation, guiding others towards self-inquiry and liberation. Ramana taught that the ego, the false sense of self we cling to, is the very thing that keeps us trapped in cycles of suffering. This is the same insight found in the Bardo Thodol. In the Chikhai Bardo, the moment of death, one encounters the clear light of ultimate reality. If this light is recognized, liberation is instantaneous. But most fail to see it because the ego clings to familiar identities, emotions, and fears. Ramana urged his followers to ask themselves, "Who am I?" Not as a question to be answered with words, but as a direct inquiry that dissolves all illusions. The Bardo Thodol teaches that upon death, those who recognize the true nature of their consciousness merge with the light. In the same way, Ramana Maharshi's path of self-inquiry leads to the realization that there is no separate self, only the eternal awareness that has always been present. His teachings also mirror the Bardo Thodol in their approach to fear. Many fear death because they believe it to be an end. The bardos reveal that it is merely a transition, just as every moment in life is a transition. Ramana taught that clinging to the idea of a separate self is what makes death seem terrifying. But once we see through this illusion, death loses its grip. He himself faced his own death with absolute serenity, knowing that nothing real could ever be lost. "I am not going anywhere," he told his disciples. "Where could I go? I am always here." In both the Bardo Thodol and Ramana's teachings, the path to liberation is not found in external rituals or complex philosophies. It is found in direct experience. The invitation is always the same: to wake up to the present moment, to recognize what is real beyond thoughts and emotions, and to surrender completely to the flow of existence. In doing so, we transcend not just death, but the illusion of separateness that binds us in life. And in that transcendence, we find the truth that has been waiting for us all along. The lessons of the Bardo Thodol also find echoes in modern psychology. One famous study that relates to these teachings is the Stanford Prison Experiment, conducted by Philip Zimbardo in 1971. This study showed how quickly people can become trapped in roles and illusions, much like souls in the bardos. Participants assigned to be prison guards took on their roles so completely that they began to abuse their authority, while those playing prisoners became submissive and fearful. The experiment revealed how identity is fluid and how belief in a false self can lead to suffering. Just as the Bardo Thodol teaches, liberation comes from seeing through illusion, realizing that we are not the roles we play, but something far greater. Zimbardo's study suggests that transformation is possible when one recognizes the illusion of the role one has been given. The same is true in the Bardo Thodol. Those who awaken to the fact that the wrathful and peaceful deities are mere projections of the mind gain freedom, just as those who see through the illusions of power and submission in life can break free from limiting beliefs. Both the Bardo Thodol and the Stanford Prison Experiment reveal that perception is everything. Whether in life or in death, liberation comes not from external change, but from inner realization. History also provides powerful examples of people who faced death with clarity and acceptance. One such example is the execution of Socrates in ancient Greece. Condemned for corrupting the youth and impiety, he was given the chance to escape, but chose to drink the poison hemlock instead. For Socrates, death was simply another transition, not something to be feared. He even comforted his followers, encouraging them to view death as a possible gateway to wisdom. His final moments reflected the very lessons found in the Bardo Thodol: to meet the unknown with equanimity, to let go of attachment, and to recognize that true knowledge comes not from clinging to life, but from understanding the nature of existence itself. As we approach the end of this exploration, we must ask ourselves, how can we apply these timeless teachings to our modern lives? In a world where materialism often overshadows spiritual understanding, where fear of death clouds our perception of life, the wisdom of the Book of the Dead, both Egyptian and Tibetan, calls us to return to the essentials. It urges us to live with awareness, to practice detachment, and to seek truth, not just in the afterlife, but in the here and now. The answer is hidden in the teachings of the bardos themselves. Because if life is also a bardo, then every moment is a chance to wake up. Every ending, every shift, every loss, every rebirth, it is all practice. The way we respond to these moments now is the way we will respond when the final transition arrives. If we can recognize this truth now, we might not need to wait for death to experience freedom. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, feel free to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.